I was always like, I need to make my first feature film before I turn 30. So my first ever short film, I used my school fees money to shoot it. My name is Daniel Oriahi. I'm a Nigerian filmmaker. I've been making films for more than a decade now. My first film was Misfit, which I did in 2013. I did Taxi Driver Show in 2015, Sylvia in 2016, which came out in 2018. I did a couple of, and when I mean a couple of, I did a lot of TV movies, web series. I spent probably 6-7 years doing that. Then I went into directing. Teaching directing for film. Directing for film and television at the Ebony Life Creative Academy. I was there for 2 years. Then I made my most recent film, The Weekend, which is going to be released today, August 30th. So, yeah. Favorite thing about making films is, first and foremost, I love films. I love the energy, I love the emotions that are conveyed through films. I'm very connected to characters. You know, then you have a band of brothers, sisters, people coming together to make something work. It could be very overwhelming. I think that's equally part of the high. Like, it's kind of overwhelming because filmmaking is like a collation of all the art forms combined: music, dance, performance, you know. So there's this level of awareness that you should have as a filmmaker, and I think I love that aspect of just always acquiring knowledge and exploring or executing that knowledge. Three films primarily. Now I have a better understanding why these films had a massive impact on me. If I want to just go into film history, there was a time in American cinema where there was this fresh influx of filmmakers, young filmmakers, into the Hollywood terrain, and they were known as the Hollywood brats, and this included Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, and Francis Ford Coppola. So the first film that really sparked my interest into filmmaking is a film called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was made by Steven Spielberg, I believe in 1977. Why I found this film thoroughly immersive was the use of suspense, the use of sound design, the use of music, and just the effects at the time, the special effects at the time were just very profound. I remember watching that film probably when I was like 12, 13, and it just really made me overwhelmed by the whole concept of what film is. So there's a particular scene that really struck me at the time. So the film basically is about aliens, and one of the phenomenons is in the Mongolian desert, and it starts off with a guy who is pulling along some donkeys in a vast plain desert. And he just stops, like he walks up to the camera and he stops and he just calls out, in his language, and you see like, just a chariot of cars, like a horde of cars, helicopters. Modernity just like zooms in, into this vast empty place, and they're all just charging towards a direction. And in the middle of the desert, we see an oil tanker that has been moved from somewhere, one ocean, and it's right smack in the middle of the desert. And I remember just watching that as a 12-year-old, and I was so mesmerized by that concept. I'd seen a lot of films before then, but that really blew my mind away. I started having a real crush on Steven Spielberg then, because I started seeing a lot of BTS, because after a film they will give you some BTS, and I was just seeing this guy. He used to wear hard glasses, he used to keep a lot of beards, and I was just like, this is the guy that made this film. I really want to be like this guy. I really want to be able to make films that, have this kind of impact. I think maybe I was 19 and I saw this film called Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola. I'm a guy, I grew up watching or liking war movies, right? And I hadn't seen an anti-war movie. Now I understand it's an anti-war movie, but the thing about Apocalypse Now was the poetic approach to the filmmaking. And it had this very profound scene where there are like 24 helicopters, they are charging into a Vietnamese village, and they are playing the Rise of the Valkyrie. So it's this tan 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 tan, and they have big speakers on their helicopters. and they are charging and they are playing this music, and I had never in my life seen any sequence that could be so captivating in terms of the war dynamics. So that particular film had a profound effect, because even the ending of it, I didn't understand it. And every time, it's one film I've watched every year. And for every time I watch it, I have a better understanding of it. It had a massive impact on me because I equally stumbled on one of the best filmmaking documentaries ever called Heart of Darkness, The Making of Apocalypse Now, which was done by his wife while he was making the film. I think any filmmaker who wants to be a filmmaker should see that documentary.
One day, some little fat girl in Ohio is going to be the new Mozart, you know, and make a beautiful film with her little father's camera recorder, and for once the so-called professionalism about movies will be destroyed forever, you know, and it'll really become an art form.
Then the last film, Taxi Driver, by Martin Scorsese in 1976. So what really moved me about the film, because the film is a character study on Travis Bickle. Travis Bickle is a Vietnam vet who is driving a taxi in the streets of New York. He's very disgruntled by what he's seen, how the city has collapsed, how moralities have failed, you know. So he eventually kind of assumes a vigilante kind of persona, but when you watch the film, you realize that this is a guy that has a mental problem, and it's based on, you know, the fact that a lot of Vietnam vets at the time, when they came back to integrate with society in America, they really struggled because they had post-traumatic stress disorder and all that. So that film was very profound because I could see a character who meant well, seemingly meant well, but he was struggling mentally. I had a massive influence that my second feature film, Taxi Driver Okashawo, was I wanted to make a homage to Taxi Driver because that was how profound it was in my cinematic journey. So I must say at this point, when I finished film school in 2009, I interned on a project for Steve Gukas, A Place in the Sun, yes. So I was an intern in that film. I did PA work primarily. But I stumbled on a guy who was doing the BTS. His name was Moody Yahaya. He actually stood out more in there was just something about his composure. He had cameras, you know, he had gadgets on him. He was well put together, you know what I mean? Like, he was just a clean guy. And I was like, this guy might be the director. I just felt like he stood out from the crowd. Then I found out he wasn't the director, he was the BTS guy. And we got talking, and I found out that this guy was an encyclopedia in film. Like 100% encyclopedia. I have not come across anybody who is as knowledgeable as he is. So when I finished film school, I went to do my service. I called him and I said, CEO, like, I'm posted in Ekiti. He said, Ekiti, what am I doing in Ekiti? I said, well, this is where they posted. And I said, no, I should come to Kogi State. That he's a consultant for a media outlet. And I went to Kogi State and I got retained at the media company he was. So for like 2 years, I was under this guy, and this was our routine. So he would say, have you heard of Akira Kurosawa? And I'm like, yes, I have. Have you seen Seven Samurai? And I'm like, no. And he's like, and you call yourself a filmmaker, you have not seen Seven Samurais? And I would feel very bad, right? Now, this is 2009, 10-ish. The internet was not really. So he used to live in a hotel that had one of the best Wi-Fi's in the whole of Kogi State. And he just downloads movies. So the next day, he would tell me I should go and do like a review and research on Akira Kurosawa, like write a one-page thesis on Akira Kurosawa. So I go online, I read about Akira Kurosawa, I'll mention his films, and he would now read it and say, okay, you've done well, okay, bring your drive. And he would give me Seven Samurai to watch, right? And that was basically how I became more of a cinephile, because he now built that thing in me to really go and watch films. I now realized that there was a world outside of Hollywood. So besides me getting that whole nuance about films and being a cinephile, he was teaching me the art and craft of cinematography and photography. And that was like the best of both worlds. So the whole concept of Unfortunately, bootlegging, copying films or downloading films from the internet it has stopped now because I now stream films from sites. But then, I literally had to download them. So I had a lot of hard drives with collections of films from different parts of the world. So I learned it from him. Yeah, if not Mudi Yahaya, I don't think I would have been the kind of filmmaker I am today. I felt like I started my filmmaking journey rather late. I was kind of juvenile delinquent in my early 20s, and now I realize I was just trying to find my identity. I really struggled academically and all that. So that really affected my esteem, and most of the ways we react to those things is to become like rebellious. So I always knew I started late. I started going to film school when I was 26. In my class, I was one of the oldest because it was just young chaps, So I had this, I need to get going. Like my first ever for real was a short film I did with my present cinematographer. We met at film school. So my first ever short film, I used my school fees money to shoot it. He shot it with a camcorder. We were just let's do something, I was always I need to make my first feature film before I turn 30. If you have the opportunity to go to a film school, this is what a film school has done for me. You kind of find a crowd. You know what I mean? You guys are like bands of brothers, and come rain, come sunshine, we are going to get these things done. So I'm somebody who does a lot of film research, film review, film analysis before I embark on the film. And I see, even on the technical part, I'm the guy who wants to hold the tripod. I'm the guy who wants to stand all through the set. I'm the guy that, is never hungry. I'm the guy who wants ethics on set. And those were things I learned while I was at film school and got groomed on how to approach filmmaking that way. Okay, so the one that has really, because I always speak from where I am right now, so the one that really that struck a nerve was Taiwanese cinema. So you have people like Edward Yang, who is late now, Hao Shuxin. I suddenly had a fascination for film history, and I studied film movements, right? So I told you how the three films that had a profound influence, they came from a movement in American cinema in the 60s, 70s. But there was a movement in Taiwan in the 80s, early 90s, Taiwanese New Wave cinema. And I think those films were not necessarily known. I don't know if you know this filmmaker called Shirwan. His name is very long. He's from Thailand. He did Uncle Bumi. The film won the Palme d'Or in 2010. So I found myself gravitating towards those kind of very meditative, transcendental kind of cinema, very slow burn, static camera, business just happens and all that. So that cinema is something that I feel a lot of Nigerians should watch. And interestingly, anybody who's seen Eyimofe is profoundly influenced by Taiwanese cinema. And, it was good to watch Eyimofe because the Esiri brothers were able to really help the film. You have to look at the history of cinema in the African region for you to now have an understanding of how Nollywood has evolved. So if you want to go into that history just briefly, a lot of African countries were colonized, right? And during the colonial era, a lot of local indigenous Africans couldn't make films. They were made by the colonial masters. So when Usman Sembène, who is considered the father of cinema, made a film, he made it in the 60s because they had gained independence and all that. So that's in record. We were making our kind of films. However, we were more drawn into the theater. So people like Herbert Ogunde, they were more of traveling theater that now absorbed cinema in capturing their theater. And that's how they started making films. So Nollywood was birthed out of a digital revolution. VHS tapes, camcorders and all that stuff. We all know the story of Kenneth Nebue, who had truckloads of VHS tapes and what do we do with it? And they made a film. I remember Nigeria was under a dictatorial rule. So there's no liberty. So what a lot of people don't know is that people who made Living in Bondage all worked for NTA and used synonyms because they could not be seen as, doing another job outside their paying job. Now, these people were groomed in the TV concept. TV influenced VHS, the DVD, video, Nollywood. So the style and approach and the aesthetics of Nollywood is very TV-esque. It's very dialogue driven, it's very flat, two-dimensional staging, lighting, hard lights, there's no that visual dynamics in storytelling. So that has had a massive influence, a massive impact, because even when African Magic came into the game, they came with tinsel, right? Which is still telenovela, very stagey and all that stuff. And I feel like the foundation of Nollywood is very TV-esque oriented, and gradually we are breaking out of that form, and hopefully we can now explore cinema in a bigger scope. Because of the environment we live in, which is very conservative, hopefully we are going to get out of that conservative space. We tend to see things in black and white. We don't know that there's a gray area. And that's grooming and understanding of how we perceive. So even a lot of us, we wear masks where we want to fit into one of these divides, and most times we want to fit into the morally acceptable divide. And it's now that we're in this era where there's an awareness of mental health. People are talking about mental health and talking about trauma and all those kind of stuff, that we are now presenting characters with complexities. And because of my own experiences growing up, I was a delinquent. I suffered from something called a brief psychosis disorder in my mid-20s. And I know how those things impacted my life. I know how they affected the people around me. Even the way we are as human beings, we change. All these things, society influences us, our immediate environment influences us. So we need to tell those kind of stories. So I'm very drawn to flawed characters, because I personally think everybody is flawed. We just live in an environment that chooses to be conservative, and it's either you are good or you are bad. And a lot of people can't stomach being in the bad side. So let's wear the mask and all be good people. But there's more to life than that. So I'm going to pick, how many again?
3.
Okay, 1. They all stuck together. Hey! Okay, so let's start with green. Africa Magic, first one. So, Do Good, because I directed Do Good. Jordan Peele, Nope. I like Nope. I actually like Nope more than, because it has that whole sci-fi, business, alien. It feels like Jaws. If anybody can really resonate with it, it feels like Jaws. I liked Nope very well. I liked Nope. Airplanes. What comes to my mind? Film or anything about airplanes. So there's a sequence in this film, Fight Club, where he has, what's his name now? Tyler Durden, right? He has this weird dream that he's crashing. I think it's a very visceral experience. I actually felt like I was in that plane crashing with him. So yeah, I think Fight Club, Nope, and Do Good. Awesome. Thank you very much.